to our special edition of Tea Time hosted by the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition. Today our guest is Dr. Yarn Brook, who is the author of Free Market Revolution, along with his co-author of Don Watkins. Thank you for being with us today, Dr. Brook.
Pleasure. Thanks for interviewing me.
So when we talk about the free market revolution, what does that really mean?
Well, first of all, it means free markets. And let's be clear, because I think people are very confused. We don't have free markets in the United States today. When I mean free of government regulations, government controls, government interventions. I mean real free markets. And I don't think we've had anything resembling free markets in the US probably for 100 years. So we're talking about changing the role of government from what it is today, which is to redistribute wealth, to regulate business, to try to control the economy, to decide, when it's a boom and when it's a bust, and all the involvement the government has, that it has in our lives, in every aspect of our lives today, to what I believe is the original intent of the founding fathers for what government should do. And what government should do is protect our rights, protect us from crooks, protect us from thieves, protect us from fraudsters, from terrorists, have a judicial system and leave us alone otherwise. And that's what a free market revolution really means. It means freeing up the market. It means getting the government off our backs and letting us actually be free. So
how do we put the genie back in the bottle?
Well, that is a big challenge. And the argument we make in the book is that the case for free markets is not primarily an economic case. The genie is not lack of knowledge in economics that people have. And if only we taught them economics, they'd get it. Right. Because economics is pretty simple. Well, I mean, if you get deep into economics, it's a complex field, but here the economics is simple. There's a direct correlation throughout human history between economic freedom and standard of living and wealth and well-being. And that's right there in front of our faces. There are plenty of examples of that. America in the 19th century and the kind of economic growth and prosperity that it generated. We went from a second-rate colony of the British Empire to the mightiest industrial power in human history, right? In a span of 130, 40 years, which are the span, not accidentally, right, of the period where we were freest. And there's examples of Hong Kong where they have incredible economic freedom and they've done phenomenally well, and in spite of having no natural resources and no safety net and no redistribution of wealth. It's exactly for those reasons they've done this been incredibly successful. So my argument is the economic argument for free markets is out there, it's clear. People have chosen to ignore it. People choose to look away, not to deal with the actual facts. And they choose their economics, they choose their belief system about politics and economics based on their ethics, not based on economic argument. And my argument is that the ethical code that exists today in America is much more consistent with socialism than it is with capitalism, much more consistent with statism, government intervention, than it is with free markets. So what I'm really calling for in the book is a moral revolution in order to bring about a free market revolution. The genie has to be, in a sense, we have to replace our existing conventional standard view of morality with a new morality, with a morality that respects individualism and freedom and enterprise and entrepreneurship. That's the kind of morality that we need to replace the morality that exists today.
So, but how do we really get there? Because, as you said, we're now in this whole different place. We're in a place where, people don't want to work as hard. They don't want to be accountable. When we talk about selfishness, people, are reviled by it, and they think that it's this horrible thing. They don't think that having an interest in your own self-worth and preservation is a good thing. So being that people from the time they're born through the entire educational system and then society and pop culture also are telling them that all these things that should be good for them are bad, how do you get people to rethink that?
Well, now I'm depressed. Maybe we can. It's hard. And we have to be very realistic about this. This is going to be war. This is hard. This is going to require enormous effort by a lot of people, but there's no way around the fact that the struggle we're in is an educational one.
Yes.
This is about education, education, education. Educate kids, educate adults, educate as many people as you can, particularly the ones who are going to be influential, the smart kids who one day will be in the media or one day will be professors at the universities or going to politics or going to think tanks. We need to educate young people on a massive scale. And you're right, we're going up against a massive educational infrastructure which is all set against us. We have one weapon on our side that is incredibly powerful. Well, we have more than one, but one big one. And that is the truth.
Right.
We have reality on our side. What we're saying is right. It's right morally and it's right factually. It's right practically and it's right ethically. And that is an enormous advantage that we cannot underestimate. So give them the infrastructure. I'll take truth over infrastructure any day. I also think we have another kind of secret weapon. And that is the link to the Founding Fathers. There's still an incredible respect in this country, across the board. Less so, I'd argue, on the coasts, right, on the bastions of liberalism, more so on the heartland. But a majority of Americans still feel a certain deep respect for the founders and the founding ideas. They don't understand them, but they kind of have a sense of it. We need to teach them about that. We need to teach them about what the founders really meant. We need to be careful here. We don't want to make the founders into people they weren't. We don't want to distort their views, which I think many people do. But we need to teach them about the founding documents and the founding spirit, because this is about a spirit. And what we need to hook up with is this desire that Americans have, in spite of everything that they're taught. Americans, in a unique way, if you look at other countries, we still want to be happy.
Yes, we do.
We still, self-help sections in the bookstore are mass. You don't find us in Europe.
Section.
Doesn't exist in Europe. Europeans, in a sense, in some deep sense, don't care about happiness. They don't want to be happy. They've been taught by existentialist philosophers that happiness is impossible. It's not important. You just live and you live for the moment. And that's why they don't want kids. I mean, there are a lot of sociological consequences to the philosophy that Europeans have adopted. Americans want to be happy. They want to be successful. They even want to make money. In spite of everything we say about the rich, who doesn't want to be rich in America? Almost everybody, right? Even those leftist kids who all voted for Obama, they want to be rich. They want to be successful. They want to be happy. That's what we need to leverage. We need to take that and we need to say, yeah, that's all good. Stop feeling guilty for it. This is why they read self-help books. All it takes is getting rid of that guilt, really. You don't need the self-help books. You need to figure out what truly your values, and you need to be consistent about pursuing your own happiness. And learn that, for example, the common label for selfishness, being a lying, cheating thief, is wrong. That's not what selfishness is. Just look at Bernie Madoff. His life is pathetic. It's self-destructive. Self-interest is about rationally figuring out what are your values, what are the things that are important to you, what makes the human animal as a species function well, achieve true fulfillment. And the things, Ayn Rand talks about them, and I encourage people to read The Virtue of Selfishness, one of her essays.
I have it, so I next.
It's important to read it, and there she says, this requires being rational, connected to reality, dealing with facts, not with fiction, not with what you feel is good, but what is truly good. It means being honest. It means honest to the facts, not corrupting your rational faculty with untruths, with falsehoods. It means having integrity and being independent and having pride in your own achievement. And one of the most important ones is be productive.
Absolutely.
Take care of yourself. Know that you can take care of your own needs, that you can feed your family, that you can clothe your family, that you can provide. Even poor people. And a friend of mine, John Allison, who was the CEO of BB&T Bank, used to talks in his talks about his grandfather, who was a bricklayer, very, very poor. But every day he went and he did his job, and he did the best job that he could, and he made enough money to take care of himself and his kids. No, he was poor. He was always poor, but he earned it. Whatever he earned was his, and he had dignity and pride. And he raised his family with pride, and he raised his family to be educated and to take pride in their own achievements. And in this case, his grandson became a CEO of one of the most successful banks in American history. But the key is that this grandfather could be happy in spite of being poor because he had pride. And pride is an incredibly important virtue. So be productive, take pride in your own productivity. And what we do with the welfare state, for example, is we eliminate pride. We tell people, don't work. You know, here's a check. You don't get pride from being needy. You don't get pride from getting a check from somebody else's work. You don't get pride from being entitled. So we're destroying whole generations of people by putting them on welfare. They're the victims. And that's a message we need to communicate. We need to hook into this idea that Americans have about happiness, about success, about prosperity, about all the good things in life, and teach them what that actually means, and then explain to them what it means in terms of politics.
So do you think that that is going to give them that sense of fulfillment and happiness? Because just like you said, what you're really talking about is the American dream.
Yes.
That everybody can share in. And, you know, I often tell people about what my history and my dad were, you know, they grew up, they were sharecroppers, but they were happy.
Yeah.
You know, and they were able to achieve the American dream by, you know, leaving the sharecropper farms and only having a limited education,
Mm-hmm.
and their children becoming educated, and they, you know, had a lot of pride and dignity in the things that they did. It wasn't a shameful thing. They were proud that they were able to do these things. And today, it's almost like that's been stripped away. You know, people don't seem to see the value in even doing a job that isn't, you know, a high-paying scale.
Absolutely, and that you know, and they suffer the consequences. I mean, we as society are all suffering as a consequence, but they are the primary victims. That is, they will never learn that sense of pride, which is where happiness comes from. You know, my view, you cannot be happy unless you have self-esteem. Self-esteem comes from achieving stuff, from knowing you can take care of yourself, from knowing that you're worthy of achievement and you're capable of achievement. It comes from taking pride in your own actions and taking pride in your own character. If you don't have that self-esteem, you can never be happy. That self-esteem comes from work primarily. The fact is that most of us spend most of our effort, most of our time, most of our mental energy at work. Most of the achievements that come about, you know, the challenges that we experience are at work. If you deny somebody work by denigrating their job, or by having a minimum wage, which denies many people a job, or by regulating industries, or by giving them welfare, or by giving unemployment insurance for 99 weeks, you're denying them the ability to be happy. That's how we should phrase it. That's how we need to make the argument. I was horrified by Romney's 47% argument, because to me, the Republicans, if they stood for what I hope they can stand for one day, should be going after that 47% and saying, you're the victims. You want to have a life, you want to be happy, you want to be successful, you want to join the middle class, then free markets are the solution. You're being institutionalized by the left into this position of poverty, into a lack of self-esteem, into a position where your life won't add up to what you want it to add up to. Join us, because we can provide you with the opportunity, not anything more than that, the opportunity, the freedom to pursue your own happiness. I mean, we always have to come back to the pursuit of happiness. It's in our Declaration of Independence. That's the secret weapon, and we need to latch on to that, and we need to take advantage of that, and we need to go after audiences. I mean, it's tragic that those who claim to be representing the free markets have given up on so many Americans.
So you have this vision, but here we are, and we are at a state where obviously, well, although, you know, Obama didn't win by a huge margin, but enough, of course, to win. But you have a huge group of people who are already tied to all these entitlements.
Yeah.
And so how do we, you know, shrink government when we have all these people who are on entitlements? You know, how do we overcome that?
Well, first you have to convince the people on entitlements that it's not good for them. The fact is that if you went to kind of a voucher system, which is what kind of the Paul Ryan plan, healthcare would improve for the elderly. The fact is that Medicare is bankrupt. I mean, that's just a fact that somebody should say. I mean, it would have been great if Mitt Romney had looked into the camera and said to the American people, Medicare and Social Security are bankrupt. They need major fixes. We can discuss what the fixes need to be, but you can't pretend that these systems can go on the way they are today. Now, I believe they should be phased out. Obviously, Romney doesn't. Obama, but at least admit it. You remember, I mean, you probably won't remember, you're too young, but when Ross Perot sat down at a desk and put out these graphs and it showed American people debt levels and how the economy wasn't doing well, people took him seriously. I mean, he was this uncharismatic little guy behind a desk showing people graphs, and he got 19% of the vote. If somebody would have just treated Americans as adults, I mean, you're seeing that in the, you know, we're right in the midst of the physical cliff debate. Nobody's treating Americans as adults. I mean, the Republicans are pathetic. I mean,
now, well, Paul Ryan did try to come out now, and well, I see your face.
You know, he did before he was nominated for vice president, but once he became part of the campaign, he was finished.
Yes, before
he was muzzled. No, I like Paul Ryan generally, but he does try to deal with these issues straight on, and that's why I respect that, and I was very optimistic when Romney chose him as vice president, but then he muzzled him, so what's the point? So, you know, my point is we need to confront these issues directly, and American people are not stupid. But if they hear the same thing, then I'll go for the more consistent. If both of them want to save Social Security, well, this guy's probably more honest about it, so let's go with Obama. And look, so you have to convince them. You know, I'm at the very tail end of the baby boom generation. I was born in '61, so at the very end, right? There is no way I'm going to get the kind of health care that people today in the 80s and 90s are getting. There's just not enough money in the world that will be able to, that will last. The unfunded liability for Medicare is it's close to $100 trillion. That's me, and that's you, and that, you know, the younger generation. They're just not going to get it. So let's be honest, say they're not going to get it. What's an alternative? We can continue the system, and there will be death panels, as Sarah Palin said. You know, when we call death panels, there'll be, you know, rationing panels. They'll have to ration healthcare because that's the only way to deal with shortages, which there will be. Let's be adult about it. Let's talk about it. Talk about solutions. I think morally, economically, the best thing is over the next generation or two, phasing out Medicare and shifting to a completely private system where people actually save and buy insurance and use the private markets for it. I think healthcare costs will go down, and I think value will go way up and quality will go way up. But okay, there are other interim steps that maybe are more political palatable, like Paul Ryan's plan. Let's take that as a first step. But you have to first talk about it, and you have to tell the truth, and you have to talk about the morality of it. How is it moral to place a burden on every child born today, which is in the six figures? It's probably close to $1 million when you take the full unfunded liability. How is it moral to say to every baby born, you have a liability when you're born of $1 million because these people want to have great health care when they die, before they die, particularly in the last few? I mean, that's just wrong. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that Social Security is a system that encourages people not to save. It's a system that teaches people that saving is a bad thing. It's a system that rewards irresponsible people and penalizes responsible people. Responsible people would save if there was no Social Security, and they would have much more money at retirement than Social Security gives them. Irresponsible people with no Social Security would spend all their money as soon as they made it. They benefit enormously from Social Security. How is that right? How is that moral? If we talked about that, I don't think the grandmothers and who are on Social Security and Medicare right now would say, yes, we still support it, this is great. They'd say, look, we paid into the system, we should get, but you know what? The system is wrong. Maybe we should start changing it. Maybe we should start reforming it. Maybe we should look to get rid of it, to replace, you know, Chile,
right? The
country of Chile, way down there in South America, privatized their Social Security system. You would think the United States of America could do it. The homeland of capitalism. You'd think we'd be able to do it. But so I think it's an issue of communication. I think it's an issue of telling the story. It's an issue of having a story to tell and having passion and having conviction and having a moral argument. an ethical moral argument for why our ideas are the right ideas. And, you know, going back to the book, this is the argument we're trying to make in the book. This is about morality. The free market revolution is a moral revolution. We need these ideas. And even if you don't agree, you know, maybe you think I'm radical in terms of how free market I want to be, even if you want to just move in that direction, you have to start making moral arguments. We are playing on, we've given the left a moral high ground, and we're playing on their field, and we'll never win. They've got the home court advantage.
Yes, they do. So, have you been able to get your message to people on Capitol Hill? Have you? I mean, because a lot of it is really educating the people who are sitting in Congress.
See, I have a very cynical view of politicians.
As many of us do.
I think politicians will do whatever they think will get them elected. I think they're very much put their finger into the wind. And so I think we get the politicians we elect, we get the politicians we deserve. I think that we need to educate the people. I think it's the voters that count. I don't think politicians matter. If the voters say we want free markets, the politicians will give them. It's not that the politicians are ideologue socialists. They're just giving the people what they want. Now, Obama, I think, is more of an ideologue than most politicians. Right. But he would have never got elected if the people were better. What we try to do is educate young people, is educate students, is educate, you know, adults. We even try to educate congressional staffers, you know, the people who actually make the decisions for the congressmen. But they're young, right? The average age of a staff is 26. So we're running, for example, a program right now where we have a monthly talk, kind of a seminar with staffers. We give them free lunch. And we're getting a good group to come. We're averaging, you know, 35, 40 people at every one of these. And we're trying to talk to them about the morality of capitalism as applied to, you know, healthcare, environmentalism, foreign policy, the economy. I just was there talking about the physical cliff. Right. Talking about all these things with the idea that these young people are going to advise their congressmen, so that hopefully we can move them, we'll move the congressmen. Sure. They will also go into politics as adults. You know, that's why they're staffers. They want to learn. Or if they don't go into politics, they will go to some think tank, or they'll be involved. These are passionate people, passionate about the state of the world. Those are the kind of people I like influencing. When I go and meet with politicians, and I just feel, you know, they say what I want to hear. They all love me when I'm there, and they say yes, yes, or, you know. And the fact is that today in Congress, there are more congressmen who have respect for Ayn Rand than ever before. There's probably at least 3 dozen of them. Do they understand it fully? I don't know. Do they agree with it fully? Probably not, but they've been influenced. So we've already had an influence through Atlas Shrugged and through Ayn Rand's ideas. I mean, in the Senate, there are a few senators. But it's going to take a lot more than that, and it's going to take educating the
teachers. Have you been able to get to any teachers?
So one of the funnest programs we have at the Institute, which we launched about 8-9 years ago, is what we do is we offer every English teacher in the United States, a high school teacher, if she'll teach Ayn Rand, we'll give her or him free copies of the books. Oh. And we thought, you know, we start the program, how many teachers want to teach Ayn Rand? A handful. We ship 400,000 copies.
Wow.
We believe about 1 million kids read Ayn Rand in high school every year. We think that changes the world right there. Yes. Because the fact is, whatever you think of Ayn Rand, she changes minds. She influences people. She changes lives. How many times have you met people who said, I read Atlas Shrugged to change my life? There's no other book that has done that. No other book in American literature that's done that. So if we can get people to read the book, that's a huge step forward. We've, for example, run the largest high school essay contest in the country. We get 29,000 essays. The kids write in high school about one of Ayn Rand's books. So we're getting to teachers through the novels. We also support a lot of university professors who are teaching these ideas, who support free markets, who support this moral case for capitalism. There are a number of university programs that do that today. And you know, I spend a lot of time on university campuses speaking, in a sense, being a counterpoint to what they're studying in classroom, right? In the classroom, yes. They get propaganda, yes. And they get something very different from me.
So you're hopeful. So when you look forward, your best guess, how much time do you think? I mean, I know we're in for a long haul.
Yeah. So this is the metaphor I use. Mm-hmm. We're all on a raft, right? 300 million people. And the raft is heading towards this very large waterfall. Not a physical cliff, a real cliff, right? And not only are we being dragged by the river towards this cliff, but we've all got oars, and we're all rowing towards the cliff. And you could argue that Democrats have big oars and Republicans have little oars, but it seems to me, unfortunately, that they're all rowing towards the cliff. It doesn't seem like anybody has the sense to row in the other direction. I think there's a limited time before you go over the cliff, and then it's a tipping point. Then it really is too late, or it's very, very difficult then to reverse course. How long do we have? I don't know. You could argue we have a decade, maybe two. I don't think it's much longer than 2 decades. And I'm not talking about 2 decades to find some island where we can, I'm just talking about turning this thing around and starting to row in the other direction. We need a major shift. We need a change in the way Americans think about the world. And the Tea Party, I think, is a right first step, but it's only a first step. And we need this to be a massive movement to change direction, and it needs to happen soon, because the more entrenched these forces get in Washington, the more government gets entrenched into our lives, the more we are corrupted by a bad morality and a bad philosophy and a bad way of looking about the world, the more difficult it is to replace. And then we're going bankrupt. So at some point we fall off the financial cliff, which is part of this bigger cliff. So we've got 20 years to turn it around. I guess if, what are the odds or how optimistic or pessimistic am I depends on the day you ask me. I don't think there's a science here. I think we have to be realistic. The odds are not good.
Right. So how much pain? I mean, because, when I look at everything that's happening and people are getting used to the high gas prices and they're getting used to all of the regulations and they're getting used to, doing with less and not even questioning the government, not even, demanding that.
Absolutely.
It's like, how much pain are people willing to
An
bear?
infinite amount. I mean, people do not learn from experience. It's one of the great shocks.
Now you're depressing me.
It's very depressing. People do not learn from experience. People do not learn from pain. People get used to pain. I mean, people, look at Europe. Look at Europe. Look at Japan. Japan's been in recession for 21 years. And they just elected a new government that's promised to do exactly the same thing as the governments have for 21 years, which hasn't worked. The definition, Einstein's definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We have, in Japan, in the US, and Europe, have an insane culture. We're nuts. And when you're insane, experience doesn't change anything. Pain doesn't change anything. This is an intellectual, ideological battle. We have to change people's ideas. In the 19th century, the U.S. economy grew at 8, 9, 10% economic growth a year. We invented things like airplanes, trains, automobiles, electricity, indoor plumbing. I mean, wow. I mean, life's truly changed. Today, we get excited if we have a new app for the iPhone, right?
Right.
The change today in terms of innovation is minor as compared to what it was back then.
And, hopefully we will get there and we can get the oars going back the other way.
And we got to fight. We've got to fight. What alternative is there in life when you know what is possible? You can't give up on that. You've got to fight. And again, here, it's worth remembering the founders who were willing to put their lives, their honor, their property and their sacred honor on the line for freedom, for something they really believed in. If people like us who believe in these ideas are willing to put the same on the line, then I start being optimistic and saying we can win.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.